Some crimes can be summed up in a single sentence, but behind that sentence can be years of lies, fear, and silence. This is a story in which the victim knew too much, and the one truth she saw that night was deadly. Summer 2009, El Paso, Texas. Gloria Marmolejo returns home, although no one was expecting her so early. A few hours later, she disappears. Her car is abandoned, her belongings are neatly folded, and her house seems frozen in anticipation. What could this woman have seen that drove someone to commit murder? And why was the truth so monstrous that it had to be paid for with her life? El Paso is a city on the border with Mexico, stretching along the Rio Grande. In the summer, it is like a hot stone. The asphalt trembles from the heat, the air is thick, dust penetrates every crack. Here, everyone knows everyone else by name, especially in quiet residential areas where every neighbor is almost a relative. Gloria Marmolejo's house stood on one of those streets. White shutters, a well-kept yard, evening gatherings on the veranda. To a passerby, it looked like a model of stability. Gloria, a 54-year-old mother of 2 sons, was known as a caring, energetic woman. She worked, kept in touch with relatives, and participated in the life of the local church. She did not have a habit of suddenly disappearing, much less leaving without warning. On July 13, 2009, Gloria left home in the morning to do her usual errands. There was no sign of trouble, but in the evening, contrary to her plans, she returned home earlier than expected. No one knows exactly what happened behind those doors, but the fact is that from that moment on, all contact with her was lost. Later, her eldest son, David, would tell his family that his mother left and didn't say where. This phrase made no sense to anyone who knew Gloria. 2 days later, her car was found on the side of the road in a remote area. It was empty inside with no signs of a struggle, and at home, there were neatly folded personal belongings, keys, documents, a phone. Everything indicated that she had no intention of leaving the house for long. Relatives began calling all their friends. No one had seen Gloria. The police began an investigation, questioning neighbors, checking surveillance camera recordings, requesting cell phone data. Already in the first days, the investigation noticed that David Marmolejo was giving evasive answers to questions. His story about where he was on the day of his disappearance did not match the phone data. On July 20th, Gloria's body was found in a desert area outside the city of Antonio, New Mexico. She had been strangled. There were no signs of robbery or sexual motive. Her jewelry and bag were still with her. This was a crime dictated by a personal reason. Few people knew the place where she was left. Random people rarely went there. For the police, this was the first clue. The criminal was probably a local and knew the area. The investigation focused on the immediate surroundings. Murders of this kind are rarely committed by strangers. During the interviews, a detail emerged. Gloria's relationship with David had recently become tense. Relatives noticed that she avoided talking about her eldest son. Further investigation revealed what they preferred to keep silent about. For many years, David had been inappropriately close to his half-sister Maria. This began when she was still a minor. From this relationship, a child was born who was given up for adoption to hide his origin. The police assumed that on the day of her disappearance, Gloria, returning home unexpectedly, found something that confirmed her old suspicions. She could have intended to tell about it or take steps that would ruin David's life. David was born and raised in El Paso. As a child, he was not known for his obedience, but he knew how to make a good impression on strangers. He was characterized by the ability to hide his actions, to control the impression of himself. Over the years, he developed traits typical of people with moral and empathic disorders: disregard for norms, conviction of his impunity, the ability to manipulate. His relationship with Maria was not an accidental weakness. It was a consciously constructed situation, maintained for years. He was used to living in a dual reality. Outwardly, a son, brother, worker. Inside, a person with a secret that cannot be revealed. When Gloria probably finally learned the truth, For David, it became a threat to his world. He understood that exposure would not only destroy relations with his family, but also lead to criminal liability. For people with his type of thinking, the threat of exposure is often perceived as a direct danger to existence. In such cases, they choose radical measures, eliminating the source of the threat. This case became a clear and bitter example of how society and state structures, even with mechanisms for control and response, can be powerless or simply inactive in the face of a hidden family threat. Maria continued to live under the same roof with David, sharing space, air, daily habits, but without any outside support. People who might have paid attention to the alarm signals chose to look away. The school, where the child's presence was still felt, did not ask unnecessary questions. Social services, called upon to intervene in risky situations, remained on the sidelines. In American culture, there is often an unspoken rule: don't interfere in other people's affairs. But in such stories, this principle ceases to be neutral. It becomes a catalyst for disaster. Here, silence turned out to be not just passivity, but invisible complicity, allowing a dangerous situation to ripen to a tragic end. And perhaps one well-timed word could have changed everything. David's arrest came in late 2009, after investigators methodically and persistently pieced together a chain of clues that, on their own, seemed like fragments. But together they formed a frighteningly clear picture. Phone records clearly placed him in the vicinity of the crime scene when it happened. Several witnesses confidently claimed to have seen his car that day, and their accounts matched in detail. Inconsistencies in his own stories only increased distrust of the defense's case. At trial, his lawyers tried to pass it off as a strange coincidence, hinting at the possibility of third-party involvement. But the jury, after listening to the arguments and carefully examining the evidence, saw a direct connection between the defendant and the murder. The verdict was clear: guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her story is a reminder that hushing up dangerous situations always ends in tragedy. David will now spend the rest of his life behind bars, but this did not bring relief to the family. The loss of their mother and the realization of who the killer was changed their lives forever. The fate of this family, like shards of broken glass, will never again fit into the same picture. One decision, one hidden truth, and a chain of events that took lives and destroyed everything around. It was a tragedy in which love, fear, despair, and mistakes were intertwined, for which one has to pay for the rest of one's days. And this was case number 99th, a story in which there are no winners, only the lost.